just a few minutes ago at 12 o'clock in Ainsworth, Nebraska. He commits to the Huskers. Huge commitment, top 100 player, pretty much in all recruiting services. He will be joining Daniel Kalon, David Hall, Isaiah McMorris, Ashton Murphy, and Donovan Jones as in-state recruits for the class of 2024. He's also the 14th commit of the month for Coach Rule and his staff. So they've been on an absolute tear. But right now, I mean, with Carter Nelson, that is that's the crown jewel of your class. That is a huge get for a guy that's had offers from everywhere.
Unless you do better.
Unless
you go out and get Brandon Baker. Take that, Carter Nelson.
But even then, I mean, an in-state tight end that has, the likes of Alabama and Georgia and Notre Dame, all in on him, and just about any other school you can name. Maybe they could. Maybe they go out and get another highly rated kid. But this is to get the in-state kid. This might either way be the for in a lot of people's minds the top get.
First off, welcome back, Bach. It's great to have you back.
Yeah.
Maybe if Nebraska goes on a recruiting tear like this, you'll have to leave again and then come back.
Apparently,
come back the day that a highly ranked recruit is supposed to make their decision. If that's how these things are going to work out. But first off, again, welcome back. But getting Carter Nelson in the boat, getting Carter Nelson N, as the kids are saying nowadays, is massive for Nebraska and for the Huskers. And I don't know how much of a pure recruiter he is, but just getting him to, put on the Husker uniform and commit might be enough to possibly at least catch the eye of some of the higher ranked recruits who maybe Nebraska has been in talks with, just to say, hey, look, we've got another guy who's top 100 ranked, top 40, the number 2 tight end in his class, or number 7, depending on what recruiting rankings you're looking at. Either way, he's a top 10 at his position and a top 100 in the entire nation. Maybe seeing that might sway the interests of some of the other highly rated recruits to at least consider giving Nebraska another chance, because you've seen, after Daniel Kalon commits, and I don't want to say it's all been him, but after he commits, Nebraska's just gone on this run of in-state commits. And after these massive recruiting weekends that they've had, you've seen a lot more people, a lot more of these high schoolers deciding to commit to Nebraska. So there's something in the water. Maybe it's the new coach, first year on the job. Maybe he'll get Nebraska back to where it's supposed to be mentality. Maybe it's a lot of hype. I don't know exactly what it is or what's going on, but as of right now, Nebraska's recruiting is on some sort of crazy tear.
It is, and I think though too, I think the Carter Nelson commitment does balance it a little bit more. I hate to keep using this term, but it's kind of what you see in recruiting is Nebraska does have, of their 21 commits now, I think 8 of them are outside, just according to 24/7, are outside the top 1,000 players in the country. Typically, maybe you get 4 or 5 of those kids in a class. So, Matt Rule has shown in his first 2 classes that he's willing to trust his own eyes, not necessarily go off, recruiting or other offers, recruiting services or other offers, and maybe give these guys chances, or sees guys that maybe don't get big time offers now because they're not quite there yet. But he sees if he puts some development into them, that they could be those type of players at this Big Ten level. But this does kind of balance that a little bit, because you do have a lot of under the radar type of guys committing. This is anything but an under the radar guy. This is as big as it gets for a Nebraska in-state recruit in quite some time. And Malachi Coleman, another top 100 player last year that Nebraska was able to grab in state. But, when you kind of think about guys with that profile, maybe Niles Paul, Baker Steinkuhlers, you go back to those, it isn't every year that you get the opportunity in state to grab a top 100 kid from Nebraska. And for this staff to immediately have that, not only have that opportunity, but to land both those guys in back-to-back classes is absolutely huge. And then obviously you kind of think of the tight end room and how good that looks. If Thomas Fedoni can kind of break free from being a little bit injury prone and have a big year.
The shackles of the injuries.
That's right. And obviously Eric Gilbert, you hope to see him get his pass so he can play this year. But just absolutely huge. And then the other thing is typically you kind of think of Nebraska as far as in-state recruiting as, okay, you might not get the skill position players, but you can pepper in some offensive linemen and maybe a linebacker here and there. This class is led by its in-state Nebraska skill position players now. I mean, you thinking down the line, you could, 3 or 4 years from now, have Daniel Kalen lining up with Davon Holland, Isaiah McMorris, and now Carter Nelson. Those are all, your skill positions.
Yeah, if you're thinking about, as you said, 3 years from now, however many years from now, you could have a Nebraska quarterback from the state throwing touchdown passes to an in-state wide receiver, another in-state wide receiver, and an in-state tight end. Like it's a little ridiculous, or not ridiculous. It's a little crazy to think of because, as you said, when you think of in-state recruiting, you're thinking of offensive linemen, or you're thinking of linebackers, and maybe some defensive linemen as well. You're not really thinking of position players ranked this highly, at least for quite some time in the state. I know back in the day that there were a number of position players and offensive linemen that you were getting out of the state that were able to contribute at a high level, but for the most part, there haven't been as many. There have been a few, but as many in-state kids who you would think of as in a couple of years doing something like this, being and not to put any type of expectations, but being, highly regarded in a couple of years within the conference, within everything else.
Well, I think it's interesting. I bring this up too once in a while is that, the mid 90s, we talk about having to go out of the state and get the Florida speed and stuff. We talk about that a lot, but, it also kind of coincided with just a great time for Nebraska high school football and getting some of those players. I mean, you think about the mid 90s, would 95 have happened the same if you didn't have Amon Green? Obviously, down the line, you have Eric Crouch, an in-state Heisman winner, skill position wise. And so, obviously Nebraska is not at that point to get from top 5 program to number 1. But maybe this time around that in-state skill that's just popping up here for a few years, and maybe it will continue. Hopefully it continues. But maybe that can help kind of push Nebraska back into the conversation, not national titles. We're still kind of ways away from that. But back into Big Ten conversations of being a team to look out for a year.
And this isn't to say that, just because they're having success in state and they're recruiting in state, that's going to fix everything. No, you still got to, you mix in your in-state guys with some of the out-of-state guys, some of the guys from Texas and California and Georgia and Florida, Alabama, up in the Northeast and the Pennsylvania and in the DMV area. Like you still need to go out and get those guys because they're also going to help you win. But keeping the talented, the highly talented, highly ranked players that are in the state with you at the home state school is a step in the right direction. And I understand, maybe if you look back at the first year for Scott Frost, he kind of first 2 years kind of did the same thing. He did a pretty good job in his first 2 years of keeping some of the higher ranked players in the state. I think his first year he got the number 1 player, and that was Cam Jurgens. He just re-recruited him. And then the next year he got like the top 4 or 5 players to stay in state and to stay at Nebraska. But then as things went along, maybe he fell out of favor with some of the in-state guys. Maybe he fell out of favor with some of the guys in the Metro. But now you see Matt Rule making it a priority to go into the Metro, go around the state, go to tiny Ainsworth, which is a 4-hour drive from this studio right here, and pluck a top 100 player out of an 8-man school in Ainsworth, Nebraska, to commit to Nebraska. So being able to get the in-state guys is great. It's a great feeling. It's amazing. But don't think that just because you're getting the in-state guys that all of a sudden things are going to be, hunky-dory and rainbows and butterflies. You still need to go out and you still need to get some of those higher rated recruits out of other states.
Yeah, it's always going to be a mix, but it is cool to see an emphasis on Nebraska and really what Matt Rule has done. I mean, there was a time, and I remember asking Brian Munson this, who hopefully will join us tomorrow, is like, will Nebraska, I mean, how bad of a look would it be if Nebraska didn't get any of the 3 from Bellevue West? I asked him that, and that wasn't that long ago, a couple months ago. Matt Rule's been able to kind of completely turn this thing around. And like you're saying, maybe jump-started with the Daniel Kalen thing, which obviously was jump-started by Dylan Raiola not coming to Nebraska. So maybe Dylan Raiola not coming to Nebraska is helping. No, I don't know.
Who would have thought that losing the number 1 recruit in the nation would lead to recruiting success?
Yeah.
I mean, kind of. Look, I'm not saying like, yeah, this is the best thing that could have happened. No, the best thing that could have happened is getting Dylan Raiola and then mixing in this with some other highly ranked recruits. But this is also good.
Yeah, and it's just a role for Nebraska, obviously, like we've been saying. Interesting little note here for Nebraska. Hopefully they can land another top 100 recruit. Again, I went with 24/7's numbers here, and I like to jump around from recruiting sites to recruiting sites, so I don't necessarily have a favorite. But today I was doing 24/7. The last time Nebraska had 2 top 100 players, what year do you think it was?
2 top 100.
They don't necessarily have it now, but you've got one in the boat here with Carter Nelson. We'll see. They've had a lot of high players on campus.
First thought was one of the Mike Riley classes, but I feel like I'm wrong.
You were wrong.
Is it past Bo? Bo didn't do that.
It was Bo.
It was Bo?
It was a Bo year.
Oh, what year for Bo? I got nothing.
2011, Nebraska had 3 top 100 players. None of them named Amir Abdullah, also came in 2011. But Aaron Green, Jamal Turner, and Charles Jackson. 3 top 100 players.
That explains why I don't remember it.
Right. None of them necessarily turned out to be that guy at Nebraska.
I mean, Aaron Green finished his season, finished his career at TCU.
Yeah.
Jamal Turner was oft injured.
Yeah.
And
Charles Jackson injured a little bit here and there as well. How about this? How about this exercise? With those 3, okay, just top 100 players in general. If I said, okay, the last 10 of them, what year do you think that dates back to?
The last 10?
Last 10 top 100 players to commit to Nebraska.
Uh-huh. So what do I have to guess?
Like, how long ago would it have been, like, the 10th guy on that list?
The 10th guy?
Yeah.
2002.
It's the same thing. 2011.
Okay.
So you go. It's kind of fun to kind of go back through this. Again, this is according to 24/7 Sports. The last top 100 guys. Again, this is to kind of give you an idea of what Carter Nelson, the commitment, means today. Just because Nebraska doesn't get these guys very often. Malachi Coleman, of course, in 2023. Thomas Fedone in 2021.
Okay.
Turner Corcoran.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah. Fringe 5-star. Fringe 5-star.
Yeah. Big time get out of Kansas. Has played a lot. Wandale Robinson in 2019.
He was top 100.
Top 100 player. So you're averaging about one a class here outside of 2022. Mike Riley did get a few of them. Tyjon Lindsey in 2017 and Lamar Jackson in 2016. Maybe why you don't think of as Bo as having those type of guys is because he didn't his last couple of years. 2011 was the final year that he had a top 100 players. So he went from 2012 to 2015 without one. Going a little bit further back, Braylon Hurd in 2010 was one of those guys. Baker Steinkuhler in 2008. But again, you're not. There's not a whole lot of. You just don't get a top 100 players a whole lot at Nebraska.
Doesn't happen that often for Nebraska. It's a lot of development. Even though you want to say that Nebraska should be getting those high tier 5-star, 4-star guys, as Bach just pointed out. Doesn't happen that often for Nebraska. So what you've got to do as a coach at Nebraska is be that developmental guy, is being able to take those guys who still are going to be decently highly ranked, highly recruited, but they're not going to be the likes of a Carter Nelson, a Baker Steinkuhler, guys like that who are in the top 100. So what you have to do is grab those guys and turn them into potentially top 100 guys by the time their careers end at Nebraska. You're not. And maybe it'll change if you start winning.
Not if you're supposed to say the other way around.
No, if you start winning, and if you can get back to that plane again, then maybe things will change and turn around, and you can start getting back into creeping into the top 100 players and taking more than just a single top 100 player each year.
Well, yeah, and again, with Malachi Coleman and Carter Nelson, these are in-state guys. Even you go back a little bit further with Fedone and Corcoran, these are, regional guys. So, maybe that next big step is to convince a guy from the outside that this is the place to be. And we'll see. Hopefully, this class is not done. 21 commits now total. I believe Terrell was saying he was looking up the rankings. Nebraska's now up to 14th. For what it's worth, there are a few teams with like 12 commits with a lot more 4-stars that'll probably jump Nebraska at some point.
Yeah, so we were looking at this yesterday.
Yeah.
And like you said, Nebraska jumps up to 14th, just one spot ahead of Minnesota.
Take that, PJ Fleck.
But like, so looking at this, teams that I believe Nebraska will not finish ahead of by the time the National Signing Day comes around: Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Florida State, Miami, Alabama. Definitely,
Yeah,
they're at 32 because they only have 8 commits. 3 of them are 5 stars. I think Illinois is going to finish higher than Nebraska.
Really?
Yeah, I do. Oklahoma's at 41. TCU, or not TCU, Texas is down at 55. I think they'll finish high. So there's like 6 or 7 teams that I think will finish ahead of Nebraska by the time it's all said and done. So I don't believe that they'll finish as a top 20 class, maybe top 25, if not just right outside of it.
Which is interesting too, because again, this staff isn't putting an emphasis on, okay, where we're going to finish in the recruiting
offseason.
Well, just like the recruiting rankings clearly don't matter all that much to them because they're going after guys that don't have a whole lot of, hype as far as that goes or offers. And so I think that has to be somewhat, I guess, just contextualized or thought of is if you're a fan base and you're looking at where exactly they finish is realize the staff doesn't care all that much where exactly they finish. They care which guys they're getting.
Exactly.
And which guys they see potential in and maybe fits for the culture and developmentally and all of that. So big news, big day.
We'll
Nebraska.
See if Stanford stays at 11.
Stanford's probably going to stay at 11. Big news, big day for Nebraska. Carter Nelson, Ainsworth tight end, commits to the Huskers.